It was the kind of day that soaked through your bones. And Victor Barnes didn't even have a decent umbrella, just a cheap one with a bent rib and a stubborn button that barely popped open. He huddled under its narrow cover, one hand gripping the handle, the other holding his daughter's small hand as they walked the path toward the only dry spot at the playground, the covered bench beneath the tree. "Daddy, my socks are squishy," 5-year-old Freya said with a dramatic sniffle. "I know, baby," Victor replied, crouching to wipe her wet sneakers with the sleeve of his hoodie. "We'll only stay a little while, then we'll get hot chocolate, okay?" Freya nodded, her curls damp with drizzle, her wide brown eyes scanning the empty swings. "Can I go down the slide?" quickly. "Just once." She ran off, squealing, while Victor stood up and shook the umbrella. That's when he spotted her, a woman alone sitting on the wet metal bench across from him. No umbrella, no hood, just long, damp hair clinging to the back of her beige coat. She looked out of place here, like someone who belonged in a glossy magazine, not in this small town park in the rain. She didn't notice him at first. She was staring down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap like she was trying not to fall apart. Victor hesitated, then sighed and walked over. "Hey," he said gently, holding the umbrella over her without asking. "You're gonna catch pneumonia sitting like that." She blinked up at him, startled. Her eyes were gray-blue, like a summer storm, and they locked on his face like she hadn't seen a real human in days. I'm fine," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're soaked." "I didn't expect it to rain." Victor offered a small smile. "Neither did I, but this thing's big enough for two, if we squeeze." She gave a short laugh, soft and surprised, like she hadn't heard her own voice in a while. "You don't even know me. I know you're sitting alone in the rain and pretending you're okay when you're clearly not." She looked at him for a long beat. Then finally she shifted slightly, letting him sit beside her, both of them under the flimsy canopy. "I'm Flora Prescott," she said, her voice steadier now. "Victor Barnes," he replied. "That's my daughter over there, Freya." Flora followed his gaze and watched the little girl come flying down the slide, soaked and laughing. "She's beautiful." "Thanks." "She's my whole world." There was a silence between them, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just full, like there was more to say but words would only mess it up. Victor glanced at her sideways. "You okay, Flora?" She hesitated. "Rough day," he nodded. "Yeah. I have a lot of those." "What do you do?" "I work at the auto shop off Main Street. Fix brakes, change oil, try to pay rent on time. Not glamorous." She tilted her head like she was seeing something in him. "You're a good dad." "I try." Another silence. Then Flora said, "I haven't been back here in a long time. I used to come to this park when I was little." "Then maybe the rain brought you to the right place." Flora looked down, her lips twitching into something close to a smile. Freya ran back over, holding a soggy leaf. "Look, Daddy." "It's shaped like a heart." Victor took it, laughing. "It is." Flora leaned forward. "Hi, Freya, I'm Flora." Freya stared at her, then whispered loudly to Victor, "She's really pretty." Flora laughed, and something in her face changed. Softer, lighter. Victor stood. "Look, I've got to get this one into dry clothes, but do you need a ride? Or at least a real umbrella?" She hesitated. "No, but thank you for this." He handed her the umbrella. "Keep it." "What about you?" "I'll run for it." She looked at him like she wanted to say more, but didn't. Victor picked up Freya and turned. "Take care, Flora." As he jogged toward the parking lot, Flora sat under the umbrella, watching them leave, her fingers curled around the handle like it was the first warm thing she'd held all day. She didn't know why the simple act of kindness from a stranger had hit her so hard. Maybe it was because he didn't know who she was, or what she had. Because Flora Prescott wasn't just some woman at a playground, she was a millionaire. And she had just fallen in love with a poor dad holding a broken umbrella. The next day, Victor was elbow-deep in a leaky engine when the bell above the garage door rang. "Be right there," he called, wiping his hands on a rag. He stepped out from behind the car and froze. Flora. Dry this time, hair brushed, wearing a navy coat and boots that probably cost more than his rent. She was holding a brand new umbrella and a box of donuts. "I thought maybe you'd want this back," she said, holding out the umbrella. "That's not mine," he said. She smiled. "No. Yours was barely surviving. I figured it deserved retirement." Victor blinked. "You came all the way out here to give me an umbrella and donuts." He looked down at the box. "You know how to win someone over." I was hoping you'd say that, he eyed her. You really don't seem like someone who needs my kind of help. What kind is that? The broke, exhausted, worn-out single dad kind. She stepped closer. That's exactly the kind I need. Victor stared at her, heart thumping. You're serious? Flora nodded. I don't care what you do or don't have, Victor. Yesterday, you gave me an umbrella when I had nothing to offer. That meant something. He ran a hand through his hair, still stunned. I don't even know what this is. It's me asking if you'll meet me for coffee tonight. Dinner, maybe. She looked at him like it mattered. With you, Freya can come too, or not, whatever feels right. Victor looked down at his grease-stained shirt, then up at the woman who just cracked his world wide open. He grinned. You're the strangest thing to ever walk into this garage, and you're the kindest man I've met in a long time. Dinner then, he said, but only if I get to pay. She raised an eyebrow. We'll negotiate. As she turned to leave, Victor glanced at the umbrella and the expensive boots and felt something twist in his chest. Who was this woman? And why did it already feel like he never wanted her to leave? Victor had never been inside the Westwood Hotel before. He'd driven past it plenty of times, always assuming it was one of those places people booked for anniversaries or high school reunions. He hadn't expected to walk through its revolving doors with his daughter's tiny hand in his, and his heart pounding like it was trying to escape his chest. The concierge offered a polite nod as they stepped inside. Victor nodded back, unsure if he should say something or just keep moving. Freya, clutching her stuffed fox under one arm, stared wide-eyed at the glass chandelier above them like it might start raining glitter. Is this a castle? She whispered. Victor leaned close. Feels like it, doesn't it? They followed the directions Flora had given him. Second floor, private dining lounge left past the piano. He half expected to be stopped by someone in a suit asking if he belonged there, but no one batted an eye. And then, just past a wall of velvet curtains, she was there. Flora stood near a table by the window, her coat draped over the back of a chair, her hair swept up into a loose twist that made her look nothing like the woman from the park. She wore a dark blue blouse tucked into high-waisted trousers, polished but not flashy, elegant without trying. She looked up and smiled, not the kind people give out of politeness, but the kind that said they'd been waiting for this exact moment. I'm glad you came. Victor gestured to Freya. She insisted on wearing her nice shoes. Freya did a little twirl, and Flora bent down to her level. I love those, you have great taste. I almost wore my sparkly crown, Freya said solemnly. I wish you had. They sat. The table had fresh flowers and cloth napkins. Victor had never seen a kid's menu printed on cardstock before. A waiter approached, silent and efficient, offering options that made Victor hesitate. Would you like something to drink? The waiter asked. Water's fine. Flora glanced at the waiter. Still water, please, and a hot chocolate for Freya. Freya's face lit up. Victor caught the subtle way Flora had taken control without making it obvious. It wasn't commanding, it was seamless, like she was used to making things happen without forcing them. You didn't have to do all this, Victor said quietly once the waiter left. I wanted to. He looked around. This place is something else. I grew up coming here. Victor raised an eyebrow. You from around here, edge of town near the lake. My parents used to host charity dinners here every spring. She picked up her glass but didn't drink. It's been a long time. Victor studied her, noticing the way her posture held tension even when she smiled. You said you hadn't been back in a while. I left when I was 18. Spent most of the last decade in New York. Doing what? Running a company I inherited before I was ready. She met his eyes. You're probably wondering why I didn't say all this at the park. I figured you had your reasons. I did, she said. And I still do. Freya interrupted, tapping her spoon against the table. Daddy, can I have pancakes for dinner? Victor blinked at the menu. Sure, sweetheart. If they make them here, I already asked, Flora said with a grin. They do. Freya let out a triumphant giggle. As they ordered, Victor kept glancing at Flora, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one who'd been sitting soaked on a bench 24 hours ago. She didn't fit into any category he knew. And yet, the way she talked to Freya, the way she looked at him, it didn't feel like she was pretending. So what brought you back? He asked once Freya was busy drawing on the back of her menu. My father passed away 2 weeks ago. She said it plainly, without sentimental softness. Victor's voice lowered. I'm sorry. She nodded, folding her napkin once, then again. He left me the house and everything else. Victor leaned back. Everything. He owned a lot more than I realized. Real estate, stocks, businesses. He was private about it when I was younger. I knew some of it, but not the full scale. Victor didn't respond right away. Their meals arrived, Freya's pancakes stacked high with strawberries, Victor's steak and Flora's salmon, but the air between them had changed. Can I ask you something? He said finally. Of course. Why me? She looked at him, her expression unreadable. You didn't look at me like I was broken. I didn't know. That's the point. She paused. I've spent most of my life around people who only care about what I can give them. You gave me something when I had nothing to offer. Not even a name. Victor shifted in his seat. You were having a rough day. I just did what anyone would do. No, she said. Most people would have walked past. You didn't. Freya slathered syrup across her pancakes and looked up. Are you going to be my new mommy? Victor nearly choked on his water. Freya, he began, but Flora only laughed. That's a big job, she said, reaching gently across the table. But I like the interview process so far. Victor's ears burned. Sorry about that. She's got a wild imagination. I don't mind. Flora's voice was soft. I've never had anyone ask me that before. Victor met her gaze. Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement without pressure, curiosity without fear. As dinner wound down, Flora paid the bill without blinking, and Victor didn't argue. Not because he didn't want to, because he could tell this wasn't a power play. It was just who she was. Outside, the night had turned crisp. Flora pulled on her coat and walked them to the truck parked across the street. Victor opened the door for Freya and buckled her in. She's asleep already, he said, shutting the door. Flora stood beside him, hands in her pockets. She's amazing. She is. They stood under the glow of the street lamp, the quiet of the evening wrapping around them like a secret. I'm staying in town for a while, Flora said. I was thinking of renovating the house, maybe even living in it again. Victor raised an eyebrow. You're trading skyscrapers for small town sidewalks. I'm trading noise for peace, and maybe something real, he exhaled slowly. You sure you're not just running from something? Maybe I am, she admitted, but I'm also running toward something. I just don't know what yet. Victor leaned against the truck. Well, if you ever want help fixing things up, I know my way around a power drill, she smiled. I just might take you up on that. He watched her start to turn away, then stopped her with a quiet, hey. She looked back. Thanks for tonight. Thank you for yesterday. Then, with the kind of certainty that didn't need a label, she leaned up and kissed his cheek. Not shy, not rushed, just sure. Victor stood there a long time after she walked away, the street lamp flickering above him. He didn't know what this thing was, but he knew exactly how it felt. The hammer slipped from Victor's grip and slammed against his thumb. Ah, damn it, Freya's voice rang out from behind him. Daddy, you said a bad word, Victor winced, sucking the sting from his thumb. I know. Don't repeat it. She was crouched by a pile of paint chips, sorting them like they were treasure. Are we making her house pretty now? He glanced at the half-stripped living room wall, the latter lopsided against chipped molding, and the tarp-covered floor littered in debris. We're trying. Flora appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, holding a rusted curtain rod like a sword. There's a graveyard of these in the attic. Someone in 1975 had a real obsession with brass. Victor set the hammer down. I thought you wanted to hire contractors. I did. But then one quoted me $20,000 just to sand the floors. I'd rather learn how to do it myself. He raised an eyebrow. You, on your knees with a belt sander, her voice didn't waver. Why not? Because your jacket looks like it costs more than my truck. She walked past him without answering, crouching beside Freya. Which color do you like best? Freya held up a pale lavender chip. This one. It looks like clouds when the sun goes to sleep. Flora nodded solemnly. Then that's the one. Victor leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You realize you just gave a 5-year-old the power to redecorate your living room. She's got better instincts than most designers I've worked with. He studied her as she rummaged through a box of old nails. There was dirt on her cheek and a rip at the hem of her shirt, and still, she looked like she belonged here more than anywhere else he'd seen her. Not because of the house. because of the way she moved through it like she wasn't afraid of what it had been or what it might become. When Freya wandered off to play in the sunroom, Victor stepped closer. "You're different here." Flora didn't flinch. "So are you. I mean it. You're not trying so hard. I'm not used to having people around who don't expect me to be someone else." He glanced toward the hallway, where sunlight filtered through stained glass and scattered across the floor like confetti. "You ever think about what this house used to sound like, all the time?" she said. "My mother played piano in the mornings. My father used to hum when he read the newspaper. I remember the way the door creaked when he left for work. That's the only thing I haven't fixed." Victor tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because it reminds me of him." They stood in silence, the kind that hung between two people who'd started to see each other clearly. Then Flora said, "There's something I need to tell you." Victor's stomach tightened. "All right." She didn't look away. "I'm not just wealthy. I'm the majority shareholder in Prescott Holdings. That includes the real estate firm that owns half the town's commercial strip." He blinked. "That's yours. It was my father's. Now it's mine. And that includes the lease on the auto shop." Victor's shoulders tensed. "Wait. My shop." "It wasn't intentional," she said quickly. "I didn't even realize it until I saw the monthly reports last night. I swear I didn't know." He stared at her. "So what now? You going to raise the rent?" "Of course not. I'm not here to take anything from you. But that's the problem, isn't it? You could." She stepped forward. "Victor, I came to you in the rain because I needed to feel like someone saw me for me. I never planned for any of this to get messy. But now that it has, I'd rather be honest than pretend everything's simple." He dropped his gaze. "I can't be the guy you date while signing my paychecks behind the scenes. I'm not signing them. I'm stepping away. I've already begun the transfer process to make the local properties community-owned." His head snapped up. "What? I don't want power over anyone, least of all you." He looked at her like she was speaking another language. "Why would you do that?" "Because this place should belong to the people who live in it. And because I want to know that when you look at me, it's not with a question behind your eyes." Freya's voice floated in from the next room. "Daddy, I found a spider, but it's nice." Victor didn't move. "You'd really give all that up?" "I'm not giving it up. I'm giving it back. And I'd do it again 100 times if it meant I could stand in this broken house with you and not feel like I'm on a stage." He didn't answer, not right away. His eyes traced the lines of her face, the dirt beneath her nails, the stubborn set of her jaw. Then he said, "I don't know what to do with you." She smiled. "You're not supposed to do anything. Just be here." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead with a thumb still stained from engine grease. "You're going to ruin me, or maybe I'll rebuild you." They didn't kiss, not yet. But the air between them shifted, like a page had turned, and neither of them had noticed until now. Flora stepped back. "Come tomorrow, we'll finish the dining room." Victor hesitated. "You still want me around?" "I need you around." Freya peeked around the corner. "Daddy, the spider has babies," Victor groaned. "Perfect." Flora laughed, a real laugh this time, and walked toward the sunroom. Victor watched her go, stunned by the way everything he thought he knew had tilted sideways. She wasn't just a millionaire. She was a hurricane disguised as a whisper. And somehow, she'd made him want to stand in the middle of it. Rain lashed against the windows, but the fire in the hearth crackled steady and warm. The house glowed soft lamplight in every room, newly painted walls still smelling faintly of lavender, and the scent of baked cinnamon rising from the kitchen. Flora pulled her hair into a low twist with one hand while balancing a tray of mugs with the other. "You're sure she'll like it?" she asked, peering over the tray at Victor, who was crouched near the couch, tucking a fleece blanket around Freya. "She's got a sweet tooth that could topple empires. She'll love it." Freya was curled up with a picture book, her fox plush tucked under her chin. "Is it the hot chocolate with the tiny marshmallows or the big ones?" Flora set the tray on the coffee table. "Both. I couldn't decide, so I added whipped cream too." Freya's eyes widened. "This is the best day." Victor leaned back, his arm brushing Flora's as he settled beside her on the couch. "You've officially outdone every Saturday night I've ever had." Flora laughed under her breath, sipping from her mug. "This is new for me. I've never had people in this house who didn't come wearing suits and speaking in percentages." Victor looked around the room. "It doesn't feel like a house anymore. It feels like a home." She set her mug down. That's what I want it to be. He watched her for a long moment. You're not going back to New York, are you? She shook her head. No, even with everything you were building there, I was building someone else's version of success. This, she gestured around the room, this is the first thing I've ever made that feels like mine. Freya's voice interrupted them again, sleepier this time. Can I sleep here tonight? Victor sat up. You sure you want to? Flora reached over and brushed a hand across Freya's curls. She can take the big guest room. I put fresh sheets on the bed. Freya nodded solemnly. As long as the fox can come too. You're both welcome, Flora said softly. Victor looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. You didn't have to make room for us. I didn't make room, she said. You filled space I didn't know was empty. Freya yawned, curling deeper into the blanket. Victor scooped her up gently and carried her down the hall. When he returned, Flora was standing near the window, watching the rain trail down the glass like silver threads. She's out, he said. Flora turned toward him but didn't step away from the window. I think I've been waiting for this for longer than I realized. Victor crossed the room slowly. Waiting for what? For something to feel real. He stopped behind her. And does it? She nodded, barely. You've seen me without the polish, no makeup, covered in dust and paint. You've seen the cracks and you're still here. I'm not going anywhere, he said. But I've got to ask you something. She turned to face him. Anything? Why me? Why not someone who fits your world better? Because you never asked me to shrink myself, and because when I was falling apart, you didn't try to fix me. You just sat in the rain and held the umbrella. He didn't speak, just reached for her, pulling her close until her head rested against his shoulder. I'm not good at this, he admitted. This is the best I've ever had it, she whispered. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in the hush of the storm. Then Victor pulled back just enough to look at her. I want to build something with you, something solid, not just this house, us. Flora's eyes didn't flicker. Then let's build it. The next morning was clear. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows as Freya danced barefoot across the tile, chasing the smell of pancakes. Victor stood at the stove while Flora set the table, barefoot herself, her hair tied up with a ribbon Freya had picked from the craft drawer. I still can't believe you own a glue gun, Victor said, flipping a pancake. I bought it yesterday. Freya said no home is complete without one. Flora poured orange juice into glasses. She's got vision. Victor turned off the burner and looked at Flora, the light catching her profile. Marry me, she froze. Not because of fear, but because of how quickly the words came. Victor, I'm not asking for a fancy ceremony, he said. I'm not even asking for an answer right now, but I know what I want, and it's you. Freya popped up beside them. Did you just say marry? Victor crouched. What do you think, kiddo? Should we stay here forever? Freya's answer was immediate. Yes, but only if we build a treehouse. Flora stepped forward, her gaze locked on Victor's. Then I guess we have plans to make. 3 weeks later, the house buzzed with quiet joy. The ceremony was small, just a garden full of wildflowers, a handful of close friends from the town, and Freya picking petals from her bouquet to decorate the path. Flora wore a simple white dress, barefoot in the grass. Victor wore his best button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up, a sunflower pinned to his chest. They exchanged vows under the oak tree in the backyard, with Freya standing between them holding both their hands. There was no orchestra. No diamond chandeliers, just laughter, sunlight, and the hum of something deeply right. Afterwards, Flora leaned against Victor at the edge of the garden, watching Freya run through the flowers. You know, she said, this all started with a broken umbrella. Victor kissed her temple. No. It started when you sat down in the rain and didn't pretend to be okay. She smiled, looking up at him. So what now? Now we fix the rest of the house and build that treehouse. And maybe. He paused, brushing a hand across her stomach. Start thinking about adding another pair of feet to all this chaos. Her eyes widened. Really? I've got the blueprints drawn up already, he said. And there's a room upstairs just waiting. Flora's hand found his. Then let's make this place loud. Messy. Full hours. Victor pulled her into his arms, and they stood there while the wind moved through the tall grass and Freya's laughter echoed across the yard. For the first time in years, neither of them was running. They had built something real. And it was just the beginning. The treehouse stood at the edge of the backyard, nestled between two strong oaks. its cedar siding already weathering into a soft gray. Victor adjusted the last latch on the trapdoor while Freya sat atop the railing, swinging her legs and humming a tune she'd made up that morning. Flora leaned out the window from inside the house, holding a Tupperware container. "Lunch is ready." "And yes, I packed extra pickles." "Victory," Freya whispered dramatically, sliding down the ladder without hesitation. Victor followed her down, wiping his hands on his jeans. "That's the last hinge on the trapdoor. All we've got left is the pulley system for the rope basket." "I want it to lift snacks," Freya said, clutching the container as Flora handed it over on the porch. "And my fox." "You've got big plans," Flora said, crouching to kiss the top of her head. "I like that." Later, after lunch and after Freya had roped them both into drawing chalk murals across the patio, Victor stood at the edge of the garden with Flora, watching his daughter pretend to be a princess guarding a fortress of daisies. "You ever regret walking into that park?" he asked, his voice warm but quiet. She didn't answer right away. "Only that I didn't do it sooner. I still think about how strange it must have looked you, sitting there soaked, me offering you that busted umbrella. I didn't care what it looked like. I remember thinking, this man sees me, not what I come with, not what I used to be, just me." Victor turned toward her. "We've come a long way from that." She looked up at him, the breeze brushing wisps of hair across her cheeks. "And yet, sometimes it still catches me off guard. That I get to have this." "You do," he said simply. "You always did. You just didn't know it yet." Inside, the house had changed again. Not in structure, those walls had long since been patched, painted, and polished, but in feel. The hallway now had hand-drawn art taped along the baseboards. The pantry shelves were labeled in Freya's blocky handwriting. And in the upstairs study, Flora had turned what was once her father's dark, towering office into a sunlit space filled with plants, open bookshelves, and a desk covered in sketches. "I've been thinking about starting something new," she said one evening, curled next to Victor on the couch while Freya napped upstairs. "Something that isn't about acquisition or profit margins." Victor nodded. "What's on your mind?" "A community cooperative. A place where people can learn to fix things, build furniture, learn how to manage a small business. Skills my father never thought were worth teaching. That's a hell of an idea. I want Freya to grow up knowing that her world can be shaped by her hands, not just her name." Victor reached over, lacing their fingers. "She's already halfway there." They were quiet for a while, the kind of silence that felt like a full conversation. Then Flora shifted. "I went to the cemetery today." Victor turned, watching her. "I hadn't been back since the funeral. For a long time, I thought if I stood there too long, I'd become the version of myself I used to be: small, careful, quiet. But today I told him I forgave him." Victor brushed his thumb along her knuckles. "I told him he didn't win," she added, "that I built something better than he ever could have. And that I didn't need his permission to be happy." Victor leaned in, kissing her temple. "You never did." 2 months later, the community space opened in the old public library building. Flora stood at the front steps, ribbon scissors in hand, while Freya danced beside her in a yellow sundress and a flower crown she'd made herself. Victor stood in the front row, arms crossed, beaming like he'd built the place with his bare hands. And in a way, he had. When the ribbon fell and the crowd clapped, Flora stepped down and made her way to him. "This is yours too," she said. "No," he replied. "This is all you." She leaned in close. "We did this together." They walked inside, the three of them, past shelves stocked with donated supplies and chalkboards already filled with names and ideas. And for the rest of the afternoon, the building thrummed with laughter and possibility. That night, after Freya had fallen asleep, Victor carried her up the stairs and tucked her in, her fox curled tight beneath her arm. He returned to their bedroom to find Flora standing at the window, her reflection cast in the glass. "I never thought I'd live here again," she said. Victor stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "And now I can't imagine being anywhere else." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "It's funny. I used to think I'd never have more than what I had: just Freya, and a job that paid enough to keep the lights on." Flora turned to face him. "And now," he kissed her, slow and certain. "Now I've got everything." The next morning, they woke early. the house filled with sunlight and the sound of little feet racing across the hallway. Freya burst into the bedroom holding a paper crown and a drawing of all three of them standing beneath the treehouse, hearts floating above their heads. "I made it for your wall," she said proudly. Victor took the drawing and held it up for Flora. "Looks like we're royalty now," Flora laughed, pulling her daughter into the bed between them. "Then we better act like it." The three of them lay there, tangled in blankets and love, while the world outside turned slowly beneath a blue sky. They didn't need more, they had it all.